Let me ask a little bit an out there question. Maybe it's a speculation, but maybe touching on Roswell. Do you think it's possible that there is out of this world aircraft or beings that are in the possession of one of the governments on this earth, like the US government? Is it possible? So, the one perspective of that, if it's possible, is it possible to keep a secret like that?
I would say this. I think it's highly possible. Because if you just look at all the sightings, and let's go, just look at Project Blue Book. There was I forget how many thousands of sightings. And there's a percentage, it's like 10 or 15% of them they still can't explain. Like our Tic Tac is one of them. They basically, the government has come out and said, we don't know what that was. Okay. So if you go, okay, of that 15% that we don't know, and of these thousands, there's still that 15% makes up a pretty big number. What are the chances that not one of them crashed somewhere on the globe and was recovered? And I don't care if it's an intact system or you got pieces of it of a metal that we can't explain, or some biological matter, to say the least. It could be intact or it couldn't, but the odds of that now are starting to go down, that that could never happen. And I'm not talking just the United States, I'm talking the world.
Globally.
So is there a chance that a foreign government actually possesses, or our government, or someone in the world, on the globe, of the 7+ billion people, has something that is not from this world? And I'm not talking a meteor, but something that was manufactured in some way that allowed transport or observation. Could be a drone, could be a foreign drone, like Voyager flies around and does all that stuff. And we got stuff that just went past Pluto that's out in the Kuiper Belt. There's stuff out there floating around. And what about ours? It's going to crash into Jupiter eventually, or whatever, because we've had stuff crash into planets. So if that's the case, you would think something is out there, that we have something that we can't explain. And according to Lou, there is stuff that we can't explain. And I would assume that Lou, who ran ATIP, has seen stuff that he can't openly talk about, because I had a clearance. Mm-hmm. When you have a clearance, you sign your name, you're bound to that. And to me, that's an important oath that you hold to. And this is kind of where people have issues with Bob. So if and I leave it to you to determine if you believe Bob or not. I'll tell you, Bob is a straightforward, very sane, normal, super smart guy.
Bob Lazar, yeah.
Yes. There is the other side that says, well, should he have come out and talked? To those who hold clearance, who, are true to the government, you would say he should have never spoke. He was under an oath to not say anything, but he did. If you ask Bob, why did you say something? His answer was, I understand there's an oath, but I felt that the technology could benefit all of mankind and it shouldn't be locked away. And I'll leave it. If you believe Bob, that's kind of what Bob says.
And that's such a interesting key point. If there is aircraft, a technology that's in the possession of the U.S. government, should they make that publicly known? This is the Snowden question. This is the question of, like, do we release stuff that can potentially change the nature of human civilization, like the way we think about our place in the world? Also, if that technology is potentially useful for military applications, the nature of military conflict, should we release that information or not, if you were the government?
So here's exactly how. So for classified information, the government is the people that classify it. So I can't look at something and go, oh my God, this Avion bottle is now top secret. I don't have the authority, the ability, or anyone to do that. That's up to the government. And I agree with that because I worked for the government for 24 years of my life. So I understand that. But now there's reasons stuff is classified, okay? And it has to do with, sometimes information is classified by how it was obtained. It's just like the mob. If I have a spy and I'm a mobster and you're the counter mobster, but I have a guy on the inside that's feeding me information, I can't do it. And a perfect example is, if you've ever seen it's the Tom Cruise movie, what is it, Air America or whatever, but he plays the guy in Louisiana who was hauling drugs for Pablo Escobar. And he ended up getting a cargo plane, and the government, the CIA, was kind of funding him to do stuff. That's how he got hooked up with Pablo, but they put cameras on his airplane. And when Reagan had come out and said, here's pictures, we have proof that they're running these drugs, It didn't take Pablo long to figure out those pictures were taken from inside of the plane of this guy he had been working with, and that guy ends up dead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you classify to protect the source. You classify to protect the technology, because if the technology would get out, it could be grave damage, or there's levels depending on if it's a secret or top secret. There are levels of damage that can be done to the U.S. government and our well-being as a country. And we owe it to this because we're all Americans. To me, no matter what some people will say, even in this country, this is the greatest country on the planet.
Yeah.
This is the only country that you have the ability to do what you want to do. It's just don't be lazy. And I have stories of people that came over here and started with nothing, and they're living the American dream. And they'll tell you, and they didn't get it because of, like you came over here from Russia, you get no minority status or anything else. You're a white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, whatever your religion, but you come over here. I kind of knew that from the last one, but you come over here, you basically have made yourself. You're educated. You're working at literally the top research university in the world, to be honest.
I can do whatever the hell I can create with a lot of hard work. I can do quite a
and no one gave it to you.
No.
So I mean, and I
well,
people.
I'm a believer that we are a community, so there is a social aspect to it, but the freedom and the American dream is a real thing. And I joke about being Russian, but I'm an American, and this is, I do believe, the greatest country on earth. So there's a reason the nationalist pride, the pride in your nation is a powerful thing. And around that, this secrecy holds value. But to me, alien technology is bigger than that. I mean, it's not so much a threat as you're holding back something that could inspire the world, human knowledge.
So let's talk in theory. So I'm going to go back to Bob, because I've talked to Bob. So Bob is a propulsion guy. Right. Bob has a bicycle with a rocket motor. He built the rocket car, so he did that. So if you are trying to figure out a propulsion system, let's just say this is Dave's theory.
Yeah.
I have custody of this thing from a technology that I don't understand. And I know it's a propulsion system. So now I got to figure it out. Right. So who are you going to go to? Right. You go find someone. So you go, wait, here's a guy who at the time was working at Los Alamos, which they have proven, who is big into propulsion. He designs all this. He builds a shit in his garage. Hey, he's super smart. Why don't we bring him in? So you hire him on a contract and you go, hey, we're going to brief you into a program, and he goes and works on wherever he says he worked. That's not important, but you get access to the technology to try and figure it out. And then you go, well, Bob comes out and says, we're figuring out these things, but there's a part where our technology isn't advanced enough for us to figure the whole thing out. So then, and let's just say Bob doesn't come out and tell anyone. He works on it until he gets to the point where he's stagnated. He's at a wall. You go, I can't do it. So sometimes the best thing is to bring in a fresh mind. So you go find someone else who's into propulsion, you bring him, and they can't figure it out, or they get to the point where, kind of back to the Einstein theory, where, hey, I've got all these theories on how it works, but we don't have the technology. We haven't advanced enough to actually do what we need to do. We still have to advance technology more. So then what do? You shelve it. You go, hey, good, project's over, end the contract. You shelf it, and you wait another 10 years. And you wait another 10 years until technology and our abilities and our research advances more. And then you go find new people to bring in that are experts in that field and go, hey, we want you to work on this thing. And here's what we know about it so far. Yeah. Or you don't tell them anything, because remember, if you reveal someone else's research, you can taint their beliefs. They'll start to sway in that direction. So you go, I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm going to give you this thing, and now you tell me what you think. And as they progress, if they get stuck on a problem that maybe Bob and someone else solved earlier, you can go, hey, what about this? You don't have to tell them where it came from. What about this? And now they can leapfrog, and they get another 2 steps closer to the final answer. And then we get stuck by our evolution of technology, and you shelve it again.
Do you think that's the right way to do it? Because it's heartbreaking. I love government, but we just had this discussion about Elon and so on. The alternative approach is to release this to the world and say there's a mystery here. And then the Elons of the world, the Jeff Bezos, we talked about money, but it's also not just money. It's this engine that's within, we talked about the American dream, to say, I'm going to be the one that cracks this mystery open. And like, that's within a lot of us. And like, money aside, people in their garage just will.
But you're thinking like a scientist. So now let's shift to, let me think like a country. So we have country A, B, and C. And you can look at the nuclear arms race. So we know that Germany was really close. We know that Russia was getting pretty close. Yeah. We just won the race, and we were the first ones with it. Yeah. And still to this day,
Germany could have won.
They could have won. They could have won, but someone was smart enough to not finish the equation when they knew they had the answer. It's literally what it comes down to. Someone was smart enough to realize if that got into the hands of the Nazis, that would be the end. And that's a tough call to do that, knowing that you have the answer and you can't solve the problem because it will go into the wrong hand. And that's kind of the fear when you look at this. You go, okay, so if we do this, if we put it out there, we've got this technology. If we don't work on it, kind of International Space Station, like where we're all going to work on it together in a, like Antarctica is really supposed to be treaty free from any weapons or anything. We're supposed to, we got the international thing down there. We're all going to work together. If you did it in the confines of that, and you could control the flow in and out, because what you don't want is someone stealing information and getting it back to where, and countries are notorious to do this. Hey, we're doing it internationally, but we're secretly doing it ourselves to see who can come up with a solution first. That's the problem, because we have this inherent thing of power, and technology like that is power. Mm. It would literally change the game of the way the world operates, and from not just a transportation or mankind, but from a military aspect, it's got huge.
Yeah. So beautifully presented. And I feel like there's a tension between those two places, the scientist view of the world and the national security view of the world. Let me get to this kind of interesting point, which is a lot of conspiracy theorists kind of paint a picture of government as as a hierarchical system that's exceptionally competent and good at hiding secrets. And then, I tend to not subscribe to almost any conspiracy theory, to the degree, at least, that the conspiracy theorists do.
I agree with you.
But there does seem to be, and I tend to think of government as, unfortunately, incompetent, at least the bureaucracy. It seems that the communication, like the 3 videos that were released, and just the way DOD in general talks about the things we've been talking about, it's just confused. It's contradictory. It's not inspiring. It's suspicious. It's just not, even the way they release the videos. The Tic Tac, if presented correctly, could just inspire a generation of scientists. It's like us going to the moon. It's inspiring. It's incredible. Yep. And the way it was released was suspicious. It was like low resolution video on a crappy website, like with some crappy documents. And why? What? I don't know how to ask this question, but can government do better? Why are they doing it this way in terms of communicating the things they do know to the public?
Because I don't think they know how. Especially in this topic, it's been hidden for so many years. And I don't think, because I don't buy off on the conspiracy stuff. I just think that, when it comes in, like I said, the government has a right to classify stuff. They classify everything because they don't know. You have something, you don't know what it is, you don't know. So we just go, well, it must be top secret, and let's put it in a vault. It's kind of like the Indiana Jones, where they take the Ark and they put it it's in the giant army warehouse. And we don't even know what we have. So, but I also believe that, and I'll say this openly, I don't think that the American people need to know everything. I think there's a reason that stuff is classified for the protection of this country. And I totally believe in that. So, I was joking with Joe when he was talking about the Storm Area 51 stuff. I'm like, that's probably the worst idea you could possibly have, is to just storm a military installation. It's just stupid. Yeah. There are reasons that we have things that we don't just let out to the public, because if we do, as soon as you do let someone know that you have something, they immediately try to counter it. And perfect example. The U.S. in the 60s developed a bomber. It was a Mach 3 compression lift bomber called the XB-70. Okay, there was 3 of them built, 3 of them ever built. It was a like 60,000 foot high, Mach 3. It was an incredible airplane when you see it. And there's actually the last one remaining is in Dayton, Ohio at the museum. It would go, the wingtips would fold down. It looks like a Concorde, but it's way faster. When that got out that we were developing it, the Soviet Union developed the MiG-25, literally a high altitude interceptor to counter that bomber. And they built an entire fleet of MiG-25s, right? We built 3 XB-70s and we scrapped the program, right? Because now you go, well, the technology is cool. We proved it, but now it becomes obsolete. So it's not even worth building a whole fleet of these things. It's constant. It's a chess game. We do something, they do something. We do something, they do something, and we do something, and then they counter it. You got to figure out how to defeat it. So you go, oh, we'll build something. So the more we keep quiet, especially from a defense standpoint, the better. I think we talk too much, and I think the military and the DoD is starting to see that, we're too open. You announce, hey, we're building this because there's a budget line, and we live in a free society. But you don't have to release all the specs, and you don't have to put everything in open source. But that's a problem when we go to the universities. If we want to go do work with MIT and you want to partner with MIT and you're a defense company and you want to partner, you guys have a rule that if you create it, then it can be open source because the university owns it and we are an institution of learning.
Yep.
Where the defense side might go, we don't really want that published in a paper in Scientific America or
it's so
IEEE.
heartbreaking. I talked to CTO of Lockheed, Keiko Jackson, and just skunkworks. Some of the best, if not the best, engineering and science, but engineering really ever is done in secrecy, and it sucks because it's so inspiring, and they can't talk about it.
It is, but some of it's due to funding. The U.S. government has deep pockets. Some of this new technology that you develop for an open source, goes back to the original conversation. There's enough money in the private sector that individuals control. Yeah. Bezos, I'm not talking Amazon, I'm talking Jeff Bezos himself, single individual is worth over $100 billion. He has the ability to do stuff. I'll tell you what, the Gates Foundation between Bill Gates and his wife and Warren Buffett and some of the other money, because I think Bezos's ex-wife actually donated a huge chunk of her half into the Gates Foundation. Yeah. So, what's the Gates Foundation worth these days? And these are guys, brilliant. Some of the greatest minds that we have to go, what are they doing? Because they have the ability it's a nonprofit. They can go, hey, I want to fund this. I want to fund this research.
They can look beyond the conflict between nations.
You can look beyond the conflict of having to have, classification. You can do what you want. It's just like, we classify how to do, the whole nuclear, how to create a critical mass, right? But there's really smart high school kids that have figured it out mathematically, and they do their science project, and then the government comes in and says, hey, we got to classify your government because we just don't want this out in the public domain, which I understand, but they never stop them from free thought and developing that. It's just, hey, we really don't want this out there. Okay, so I understand that. I totally understand that. But if they, if Bill and Melinda want to do this and go, hey, we want to do this, and they're going to work with Bezos and they're going to work with Elon, and we're going to, you think about it. There's a significant amount of money that could be available to R&D. And I'm not talking just science like this. I'm talking medical research and all this. But then you go, well, who gets it? Because now you're competing against the companies that actually do it. And you go, are they the greatest minds? I'd say, we have a tendency to go, these are the best that we have. And I'd say, well, no, that's the best that we know we have. But there's probably people out there that don't want to work. There's brilliant minds that don't want to do anything with defense because they just disagree with what it does. So they go to another path. They go do something else.
And that, in a sense, like the Elons of the world, the Jeff Bezos, are actually, in a certain sense, much better than DoD at finding the brilliant, weird minds out there.
Because they're not tied to the government. So when you work a government contract, the government writes, they tell you what they want, and then they work with you on the requirements. And they usually have an end in mean. They have an idea that this is what I want it to be. Where if you go to like SpaceX, where, they come up with, why don't we just land these things on a pad and reuse them?
Yeah.
Well, if the government scientist, if you're on a government contract, says, no, that's not the requirements, we're not paying for that, we want you to do this, you're kind of controlled. Or when Elon does it, his company, they can do whatever the hell they want to do because they have no bounds. The only bounds they have is the liability if it doesn't work and it lands on something. So what do? You go out to Kwajalein and you test it. And if it crashes and it lands in the ocean, hey, we clean it up. No big deal. We lost some money, but we'll move on. It's, money makes the world go round, contrary to what everyone thinks. But, there's a lot of money that's sitting around that you can do a lot of really cool stuff with. And I don't know. I mean, I'll guarantee that, what is it? Blue Origin? Isn't that
Blue
Amazon?
Origin, yeah.
That they're doing some cool stuff because they have funny. And I joke with the guy I know that worked at SpaceX, and he was funny because they were building the first test thing, and they were limited, and Elon found this like 400-acre thing. I think it's about 400 acres down by Waco, Texas. And he's like, I go, how? He goes, dude, I worked with, because he's done government contract. He goes, there's government contract, and then there's working at SpaceX with Elon money. And that's what he refers to it as, is Elon money, where it was like, I'll throw them, and he would throw the money at it and make it happen. And I'm talking this fast.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a great story about this. I mean, this is Elon. This is how fast you can do in the private sector vice the government, where there's the bureaucracy is. They had a company that was basically a tool and die machine shop that did a lot of their high precision parts for the rockets. Mm-hmm. They had went to the guy, but he had contracts with other companies. And when the economy was down, the guy was actually looking at going out of business. So the guy I know, he's telling me the story. He was talking to the guy. He had to go over there and get something. And he's like, holy shit. He goes, hang on. So he calls up on the phone, SpaceX. He says, hey, is Elon there? Can you get him in the boardroom? We'll be there in 20 minutes. So he grabs this guy who's literally going to fold his company. They go over to SpaceX, and I may be getting some of this wrong if people are going to fact check me, but this is pretty close. They go in the boardroom, and he said literally within like an hour or two, Elon has bought the guy's company. That guy is now a senior VP running his company, and they're going to pull all the stuff into the SpaceX thing so they can actually build the parts, and they can still contract out to make the money outside. And it happened like that fast.
And it's not just money. It's because I witnessed it too with Elon. I think it's whatever the forces of capitalism that allow a person like Elon Musk to rise to the top. But like, because I've also worked for DARPA, like for research, in terms of a source of funding, there's a weight of bureaucracy when I was working, like being funded by DARPA. And with Elon, like I was literally in the presence of like anything is possible, cutting across all the bullshit of paperwork, of the way things were done in the past, of the bureaucracy, the rules, the constraints, all of that stuff. Just you can cut across immediately.
So how much money and time do you waste dealing with the bureaucracy when you could actually be doing real work? That's the difference. This is why honestly, when I went back to the industrial defense complex that we were warned about, when you look at it and go, SpaceX can do something for half the price ahead of schedule that what we're paying Boeing, and you go, oh, well, this just came out. And you go, well, then why are we even dealing with this side when we can deal with this side?
Yeah.
Because you've got a fully automated capsule that has a manual mode that they got to fly around in. It worked like a champ. It went up, it hung out, it came back, it splashed down. It worked perfectly. We're going to dust it off. And oh, by the way, unlike the Apollo capsules that were used and then put to museums, they're going to reuse that Dragon capsule. It came down, they're going to dust it off, put a new coat of paint on it, slap it on top of another rocket, and away it goes. Holy cow.
It's amazing.
It's a shift. It's a complete shift in mentality. And for us as taxpayers, we can explore at half the cost.
Yeah. It's exciting, especially given putting the Tic Tac in context, like then the sky, it's limitless, the possibilities we could do with this kind of mechanism.
I think it's exciting.
Yeah,
I think we live in an exciting time right now, besides everything that's messed up in the world right now.
Well, this is a hopeful, like there's so much conflict going on, so much tension. That's to me, space exploration at the moment is a reason to get up in the morning and have a hope for the future, to look up to the sky. And we're humans. We can we can solve all of this.
I was talking about when I was doing the Tucker thing, and I said, this would be great, because when the government had come out, a month ago and said, hey, this does exist, we're doing this, and we're going to release more stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was texting like Lou and Chris Mellon and those guys before I went on, because they had called me up to be on Tucker's show. And I'm like, hey, I go, this would be great. Just come out with this, find the relic of a spaceship, like pull out the Roswell wreckage if you have it. Pull out the Roswell wreckage and do it. God, it would be so nice to not have to deal with the riots in the cities, and I mean, I know it's an election year and all that, but God, it would be something. It would be refreshing to not have to turn on my TV and see everything that is just depressing in the world. To begin, holy cow, we actually do have this, and we're working on this technology.
Yeah, imagine if there is a Roswell aircraft and they pull it out. Imagine the innovation that happens in the next 10 to 20 years without any more information than that. Just the innovation that happens, the look on Elon Musk's face, the look on Jeff Bezos's face, and all the brilliant engineers.
It would change the game.
It would change the game.
It would change the game completely.